Hello to all of our OISE U of T alumni and friends. My name is Natalie. I'm the Senior Alumni Programs and Donor Relations Officer at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education. And I'm pleased to welcome you to our Alumni and Friends virtual leadership lecture, Why Being Creative is Good for You, led by alumna and OISE researcher, Dr. Ella Karia, here with me today. A quick thank you to Dr. Sophia Malik. She is chair of our leadership lecture series and outstanding alumni ambassador. And we have over 320 registrants for this popular series today. I know you guys are still coming online. Before we begin, we wish to acknowledge this land on which OISE and the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit River. Today, this meeting place is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful for this opportunity to work on this land. I'd like to take a quick moment just to, before you get started, to point our attendees to another event that we have coming up, an advance screening of the hit TIFF film, Brother, which is coming up this Sunday, November 20th at Innis College Theatre. In a moment, I will share the link to get your tickets for that event as well. And we would love to see all of our OISE alumni and friends there. So as an educational consultant and researcher, Dr. Ella Karia earned her EdD degree from OISE. She is a Canadian researcher with OISE's Atkinson Centre for Society and Child Development and a certified elementary school teacher. Over the past decade, she dedicated much of her work to meet the diverse needs of students in the classroom. And as part of the research team of the Early Learning and Childcare Innovation Toolkit, she analyzed and compiled educational innovations across Canada. Dr. Karia developed resources for educators, writing books and presenting at various conferences, and she facilitated educational workshops for the Child Development Network. As an educational consultant, she continues to make a difference both locally and globally, supporting social justice educational initiatives, exploring critical consciousness, and mentoring youth while engaging in educational committees. Through her talk today, she will set pathways to enrich learning by embracing self-empowerment tools, fostering connections, and exploring creativity while focusing on leveraging learning engagements. So thank you once again for joining us today. Dr. Karia, the virtual floor is over to you. I will stop sharing my screen. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. That's great. Thank you so much to OISE, and thank you to all of you who have joined today. It's really nice to have everyone here and be involved in this speaker series. So thank you again. And I just wanted to open the floor up initially to just share my screen. So I'm just going to set that up for you. And hopefully you can all see it. And then we'll get started.
Looks good.
Okay, great. So looking now at where we're at in terms of learning and where we're at in terms of life, we start to think about post-COVID and what life is looking like. And as we start to explore how children have come in the classroom in person and their backpack and where they're at, we're starting to understand that where they're at is very different from where they were. And when we start to look closer at this, we start to realize that we need to do more analysis. And so my talk today is open to educators as well as policymakers, parents, students, and also to researchers on how do we move forward in this time that we're in. So the title today of my talk is Why Be Creative is Good for You, and also linking it to identity, our individual identity, as well as looking at how we fit in the collective identities of those around us in our circles. And the importance of how this is becoming more and more important for our students, as well as for our educators and all those in the organizations in where they work. So I'll get started with my slide. And to get started, I wanted to sort of think around, first of all, my personal journey and how my perspectives are developed. So for myself, I look at my lived experiences, my life as a teacher. I've looked at some of my research project involvements and my personal value system. Now, where does that value system actually come from? And when you start to think a little more around, well, my values were established probably from childhood. and from some of the parenting styles that influenced who I am today, and how those things have stayed with me. So I encourage all of you to start to think about your value system as we have this talk today. Also, my role as a parent and my interests and hobbies and some of my talents or skills that I thought about, and how that informs sort of my biases, my perspectives, and how that creates my opinions and ideas and thoughts around different topics that may come up. And even as an educator, how I come in a classroom with a certain lens and how I have to develop more of a growth mindset in order to open myself up to allow for more engagement at a deeper level with each and every student that's in the classroom. And so today I invite looking closer at how your lens is created as well and what informed that. Some of my biases and my mindsets may have been as from years back, and then I look at past, again, looking at traditions and different motivations, maybe even my educational background may provide sort of a lens to how I see things, my culture, my race, my gender, and age. And these are just some of the things that we're looking at. When we start to think about that iceberg analogy, I'm not sure if all of you have heard of it, but the way it works is that you have the surface of water, and above it, you might just see a little bit of the iceberg, but below there's so much more in depth that hangs below the water. And so I encourage you again to think about your iceberg and where you stand, what's seen and what is actually you, and look at that as a way to visualize it. So this iceberg analogy, it's sort of a waterline of visibility. And as an educator, we sort of look at that amongst our students as well, of what do I see in each and every student that walks in my classroom? And what do I know? And what do I not know about them? And as educators, often in the beginning, we start off in September with get to know our students, all about me, all about their families. But I feel more than ever the intentional engagement with the families, the communities, and the student themselves has become a bigger part of our role as educators. Where are the gaps in their learning? Where is their learning style? What are the needs of students? And they've become more varied, more unique, and more differentiated in different ways. So what we might not see about a child may be related to their learning style, their disability, their language impairments, even heritage, their value system and where their beliefs are and how they're influenced at the young ages of elementary school age children or middle school or high school or even university students. How are they informed with their decisions and choices in how they see things? Again, personality may be a factor in how they represent their voice in the classroom. Those that tend to talk more may not necessarily be the only ones that should be vocalized. So how do we get those quieter students to speak up? So things around that as well are very, very important. And family status, life experiences for these students as well, talents and abilities. And so these are just an example of some of the things that we have to start to look closer at. And if we start to think more about these things, we will be able to engage more around identity. What helps define perspectives as well may be related to some of these other things that I've listed here: religion, faith, skills, race, gender, age, social statuses. And we're starting to hear the word of privilege or power, and those that may have it and those that may not, based on where they're starting at from the starting line. So looking at that lens as well in terms of the backgrounds of many of our students. So as we start to collect data and we start to look at each individual student, we need to start to sort of create these student portraits or profiles, and we start to look closer at how we can then scaffold and engage them deeper to provide them with more meaningful experiences. So this is where the idea of critical consciousness comes in. We have to gain more an in-depth understanding of our world and their world. And so the idea of critical consciousness comes as well from, it's a researcher that I reviewed and studied a little bit, Paulo Freire, and he wrote that critical consciousness, what does it really mean? The term originated from a Portuguese, the post-Marxist Brazilian activist and educator, Paulo Freire, and usually deemed the father of critical pedagogy. and that is the application of critical theories to the theory of education. So we start to develop a lens that has this perspective. So we're looking at analyzing perceptions, exposing contradictions, and doing more of a gap analysis. So not only just accepting and embracing what's there, but actually questioning and starting to look at where I am and where the systems are and where is that misalignment. And maybe we need to start to push a little more at the edge of asking questions around that and encouraging openness around questions being asked around those things. And this is where we look at topics of anti-Black racism. We're looking at anti-oppression. We're looking at anti-Indigenous work. We're also looking at so many other elements now in the classroom. So research studies have shown that with identity intelligence, that students become more engaged, they take away more from the learning experience, and several studies have shown that understanding your own family history and heritage can inform your perspective as well. And so a lot of the readings and research I've done have looked at where even in my personal journey, having been born in England, brought up and educated here in Canada, I carried with me some different perspectives based on culture and trying to fit in the system here. And at times it became a challenge and you're trying to merge between different worlds. And so making sense of that as a student, even in the workplace or in the classrooms or as an educator is always a challenge and an ongoing organic experience and journey for me. Even working in academia, there's always looking at how do we sort of understand ancestry and its place in terms of how you move forward in what to do next. Okay, and what I wanted to do is encourage each of you to sort of look now and think a little bit about how your childhood may have affected your present. So I have just a short little exercise. It's called Imagine a Bubble. So if you can just take we'll do 15 seconds. If you close your eyes and you just follow the instructions I mentioned, you can try to imagine your bubble. So we imagine a bubble that's around us. So we can become more aware of where our bodies are in relation to other people and things. So starting with closing your eyes, if you can start to create this imaginary bubble around your body. Mark your bubble by a drawing of an imaginary circle around you. Then reach out to explore the edges of this bubble. Press out of your bubble. Now, what might be in your bubble? If you start to think of some symbols or images of what you may decorate your bubble with, bring them into your bubble. Things that represent who you are. And hold on to that image and remember it for future. Childhood and how things in that bubble may have come back from your childhood. Things in that bubble may have come from your adulthood, but they're all a part of you. Who am I? Write a statement below your bubble of who am I? Create your sentence. This will help define your identity. Great. So if you open your eyes, I want you to now think, what does a flower need to grow? Well, if you think about a flower that's not growing in a pot, you might need to change the environment. Think about where you are in your bubble, where you are now in your present moment in life. And then introduce in your bubble things that you may need to grow in your environment that you're in. And close your eyes and add in a couple of these things, 2 or 3 things that you think would help you grow at this moment, at this time. And visualize yourself growing. Allow a light to come in and brighten your identity and what makes you unique. And remember that. Okay, so if you open your eyes, hold on to that visual, and we'll continue to build. What are the inner or outer circles? So when we think about our life and where we're at and how we explore our lives through our outer worlds, we start to think about what we do, who are we doing it with, and how we are doing it. But if we start to change that circle of influence, we make time for new engagements, we develop a sense of resistance to forces that are pushing on us, we start to connect with a more natural flow. So nurturing relationships that allow us to build more trust will give us some of the tools that we'll need to empower ourselves as we move forward post-pandemic. Building more resilience, more voice, and allowing existence versus resistance will allow you to build more personal validity. Also allowing yourself to label feelings and be aware of thoughts. Sometimes if you think about your thoughts that come and go in your mind, you can also allow yourself to be empowered to let them be released like a cloud that just floats off. It's when we hold on to thoughts that we shouldn't be holding on to that they become part of our monkey brain. And to allow ourselves not to get caught in that is very important. So being creative with our thoughts, being creative with our ways, building good habits is going to help us become more empowered. How do we take more action as we move forward? It's building these inner and outer circles. So some of the tools that we can use to build our inner circle is understanding who we are, as well as looking at giving ourselves time to be alone and giving us time to think. When we start to explore these opportunities to develop our inner selves, we will see that there's some changes or transformation that may allow us to become more creative in our ways. Whether it's creativity expressed through art, through your voice, through your writing, through poetry, you may see that result if you allow it. So I encourage you to start this creative process to build your individuality. And what makes each of you unique and how you can discover these strengths is to allow yourself not to live on a surface level or a shallow level, but a deeper level. And those conscious parts and impacts that you can have are really important. So start to define them, how you see yourself, how others may see you, and how you want to be seen. How would you build your personal voice? Self-empowerment tools. I have a few tools that I've introduced in some of the books that I've been writing, and some of them involve accessing, digging deeper, trying self-empowerment toolkit techniques, and also looking at heritage, roots, and exploring more about yourself. Allowing yourself to look at your strengths, of what you're really good at, what you are doing well, what sets you apart, what are your good qualities, and start to do a self-analysis, your individual inquiry. What are your goals? How demands are shifting and how it can be improved? What are the opportunities that lie ahead? So using this SWOT model, we can start to explore some of these things. Where is it that you need to go and what do you need to get there? What are the blockers that you're facing? And what are the factors that are out of your control? By just defining and writing them down and creating a personal journal, you might start to be able to just put in the boxes some of these things, your strengths, the opportunities, some of the blockers, and looking at how these things can affect you and who you are. Looking at weaknesses, all these things matter. If we just start to look at them a little bit closer, then we can understand ourselves better. Aligning ourselves more with exploring creativity is the time now to get started. More than ever, we need to allow students and even individuals at this time to explore it further, to ground themselves in a world that's full of change, in a world that's full of more stresses than ever before, and in a world that allows us to only explore a certain level. We need to figure out a way to get deeper. So don't live on a surface level, but allow yourself to deepen experiences each and every day. Actually start some creative activity. The creative activities will allow some healing and will allow some individual inquiry to open up. The self-empowerment toolkit is about defining your values and outlining your own container. So understanding your own vision, creating a vision board, looking at virtues, looking at your own backpack and what you carry in it, and starting to really listen to your messages by developing self-regulation skills of more mindfulness. This will help reduce stress. If we just build in more meditative moments each day, you can spend time building your inner world, which then grounds you and brings peace and allows for creativity to flow more naturally. So be mindful of how you see yourself, how others see you, and how you want to be seen. And if you start to manifest and visualize, the change and transformation will slowly happen. It's the power of our thoughts. We start to think, and then we do. The creative process, looking at defining and reflecting on where you are, and then gathering materials and inspirations. Maybe it's hanging a quote in the wall that you're in a room each day. Maybe it's a photo, but to document that and lay out a plan, create some visuals, and then start to determine the steps to achieve your goals, and eventually leading to action for change. So in my book, I do explore some different techniques and experiences myself that I've gone through on the forefront of being an educator, a researcher, as well as a parent of 2 children. I've integrated a lot of the research and development of the brain and the brain plasticity, and where there's peak periods and windows of opportunity to enhance development of the brain. If you look at Maslow's hierarchy as well, we start to think about how the pyramid defines that creativity and self-actualization sits at the very top. And so how do we actually get there? One of the things I wanted to introduce to you, aside from my book, is an app. It's called Root and Seed. And in this app, it allows you to sort of discover a little more about what makes you unique, your family stories, creating beautiful memories and documenting them. I actually have the founder of the app here today and a co-founder, and she'll say a few words, but this is just a tool that's used to sort of document your narratives and stories. You can allow yourself to have conversations with family members, grandparents, relatives, aunts, and start to understand by creating these opportunities for dialogue with family, you might start to learn more about yourself. So this app is available, and there's also a card deck, which is sort of like you pull out a card and there's questions on there, and you can do it as a family game. Jennifer, did you want to talk a little bit more about it? And it's on capture.rootandseed.com is their site. But Jennifer's here today. We're so lucky to have her, and I'm happy to introduce her. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Thank you, Ella. Yes, Root and Seed, as Ella mentioned, was created to essentially help end the loss of tradition. We realize that so many of us have beautiful cultures, amazing family stories, and incredible traditions, but these can be lost in an instant, especially since these stories and these traditions, the meaning behind heirlooms, the recipes that we love so much, are usually passed from a grandparent to a child. It's not usually from a child to a parent. And in doing so, with generations getting wider, we realize that people aren't having the conversations, and they're definitely not capturing them usually until it's too late. So we created a tool to help motivate and facilitate conversations intergenerationally, and an app that allows you to capture the audio recording so you can have those memories in the voice of your loved one for safekeeping. Now, in doing so, we found out that a lot of the questions that we had captured beautifully align with the social studies curriculums for grades 2, 4, 7, and 11, because truly understanding who I am, understanding how traditions change, understanding how the lives of the people in our families and our communities are important, that is incredibly foundational to helping children understand their roots, their family stories, therefore giving them the self-confidence and the empowerment to become who they are intended to be in their lives, especially for marginalized communities and minority communities where they have been trained over time to play small. The more they understand about who they are, the more they feel like they can become who they are intended to be, to step out and be proud. And as Ella mentioned, we have our online tool that's available at capture.rootandseed.com, as well as cards. So these cards essentially bridge the gap between children and elders, or millennials and boomers, because some people like digital and some people like the physical, the analog. So the beauty of each one of these cards is it has a QR code. And the thing that we learned about questions, when not all of us are journalists. So this question in particular, what was life like when you were a kid? If you scan the card with the QR, then it brings us to, oops, I'm going to try to, it was working before. It brings you to the card on the tool, and on the card are a series of dig deeper questions. Now, dig deeper is so important because usually someone won't have the answer to the first question. So what was your life like when you were a child? They probably won't say very much because of trauma, because they can't think of anything. But the dig deeper questions include, who made your breakfast for you when you were a child? All of a sudden it brings back thoughts of food, of caretakers. What did your bedroom look like? What did you do to get in trouble? And all of a sudden the person is thinking about it from a different perspective, from a less trauma perspective, from a more fun perspective that maybe they haven't thought of in ages. And all of a sudden the conversation is flowing. And this is a beautiful way for people to not only find out more about their history, but really truly understand their roots. And so the tool is available again at rootandseed.com. It's free, and the cards are, these ones are designed for adults, but we have a version in a teacher resource package that is designed for children, where the dig deeper questions are immediately on the back of them.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jennifer. And Annika, who's the co-founder as well, she's not here today, but her personal story was that when her mother had passed away, she realized that all the stories and narratives in the voice of her mother, she wished she had captured them before she passed, because she realized for her children, it would have been of so much value. And I think that's sort of where the seed started for this Root and Seed app, in terms of finding a way to document histories, ancestry, and honoring that as a very important part of experience as a family for generational knowledge, and that sometimes those little stories do matter and that we need to start capturing them more. And I know as a mother, when I parent as well, I tend to say, you know, we're busy running around just kind of getting our kids to do certain things, but I'm being more intentional around sharing stories of like my childhood and my experiences in a creative way. So storytelling is another way to allow creative thinking, also creative sharing. And some people can become very good at storytelling, and it's sort of a technique and skill you can develop, whether it's at the dinner table or just in conversation with children, but that bond between parent and child, and how can we nurture that more? And this is just one way. So thank you very much, and I appreciate your time. So these are just a couple tools that we've talked about today. So in my book here, I have the copy here, it's called the Exploring Creativity. So the book talks a little more around the self-empowerment toolkit and how creativity is something that we should explore in different ways, and that each of us will find a way, but we just have to allow it, and exploring it and reaching out to actually start building it into your life, even if it's through creative meals that you prepare for your family, or just in terms of how you represent yourself in your dress, or how you do your hair, or it could start to become these small micro decisions that eventually build up to introducing creativity in so many different ways, and how you share a story, or how you speak to a neighbor, or how you interact with others. And eventually you become in this mindset, this creative mindset, and this idea of critical consciousness, and being aware of the world around you, and creating yourself, designing your life in the way that you want it to be. So these are all just great tools, the book, the app, and the card deck, to dig a little deeper. So thank you very much for everyone for listening. I'm open the chat for questions and comments, and any shared experiences for those of you here today. So I did want to give some time for that. And my email address is there if anyone needs to reach out to me. It's ella.karia@utoronto.ca. I have a site, fosteringcreativity.ca, and my site as well for drellacaria.com.
Thank you so much, Dr. Karia. That was beautiful. I noticed there is a question right now in the Q&A.
Okay.
You want to take a look. Someone is asking, what does the T mean in strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and blockers? Did we catch that?
So sorry, the question being, I'm just trying to see if I can see it on the chat here.
Yeah, no worries. So what does T mean in the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and blockers?
Oh, in the acronym, like the SW.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, the SWOT. So we have the, just pull it up here. So can just refer to that section. So we have the strengths, weaknesses. I think it was the strengths, weaknesses. Just take a look at it quickly.
And threats is
Threats.
some folks
Yeah,
are
that was it. Yeah, so I mean, threats is one way of looking at it, but when we start to look at critical consciousness, it's about the sort of the things that are oppressing you. So like you start to look at when you go at, like in today's system in education, we find that we need to overcome systemic barriers. So we're looking at how should we allow change to happen with the way that things are done now. So if we have a pool of students that require certain things, and we're not providing those things in the classroom, then we look at the student might see it as threats. So that the idea that they are not allowed to be who they are truly because there's these barriers in place that don't allow. So as educators, we try to facilitate or open our thinking to think about how can we include, be more inclusive, how do we allow for more voices to be heard, and how do we allow for these shared dialogue experiences? Because a lot of the learning is happening by hearing the different generational knowledge that's being built. A lot of it's coming through their experiences through the social media, or there's that idea of imposter syndrome where children are struggling with nowadays, where They feel that in reality, they're not really happy and there's a lot going on that's upsetting, but on social media, their life looks great. And so there's these inner struggles, these inner challenges. And so now, how do we look at something like that in terms of, is that actually a threat to a child when they have those ideas of social media sort of pressure to them? Is that something that we need to re-examine, or how that could affect how they represent themselves and how they feel about themselves? So just some like little things like that. But in this generation and what we're dealing with now with COVID, there's just so many things that have become sort of on the table that may have not before. I'll give you one example where a few students have been diagnosed with social anxiety because they've been online for a couple of years, and first year coming back in person, they may be challenged with not being able to actually eat in front of others, or they're challenged with interaction with other students. So we need to be aware that there are some challenges that are there for some of these learners, and then how do we then now re-assimilate them into the environment where they're one of 25 students in a classroom and encourage them to engage. So there's a few things that we can work on to develop those things. So that's what it was referred to as terms of looking at building that critical consciousness lens through looking at some of these things.
Thank you so much. I hope that that was a very good answer to the question that was posed. Are there any other questions? You can use the chat box or the Q&A. Jennifer also shared the link to the Root and Seed app, which, as mentioned, is a free online tool with over 500 question prompts and some other interesting features for educators and families. So be sure to check that out.
Absolutely. And as well, I know for students, as we explore through curriculum, even celebrations, as we move into sort of different cultural celebrations, we try to invite as well, like parents or students, to share their experiences, so those authentic experiences, and sometimes documenting them as well, and encouraging like an all about me folder throughout the year where students can like create a slide and then add to it and add pictures and define their celebrations and how do they represent them and explore it a little further, allows them to sort of learn about things and also be proud of them. So it's really, really nice to see the pride and joy when they share. And I think some of it is that deepened social emotional connection to learning when we allow it to be more meaningful. So I just wanted to let you know that any opportunities there are to allow that experience, I feel it empowers learners as well.
That is such a wonderful idea.
I'm just taking a look to see if there's any other questions, but Natalie, let me know if there is, and I can definitely answer them.
Yeah, certainly. So Geraldine just wrote in the chat, she says, they say, how about encouraging students to create questions they can ask their parents? Share these questions with other students. Older students might enjoy this.
Absolutely. So sort of making your own family game, like that could be, your own game, and it could be questions that children come up with that they're curious about, and they can write them out. And then, you could have a little jar at home where you actually put them in, and then each day you pick out one, and that's the like spark for conversation. So it encourages dialogue. What we're finding is, how can we create more dialogue? Because so many children are holding things in, they're not sharing, but just a simple thing like that, a jar with little questions that they may come up with that they're curious about, may be a way to get them started in terms of talking and sharing. And it also, when you start to talk and share, you're also building self-confidence, self-esteem. They feel their voice is important. They're given a chance and allowed to share their thinking. So I think those little things can mean a lot as you create those little traditions, even within your households, or amongst friends, or amongst coworkers or educators. It's just allowing those experiences to flow can create an environment that allows for critical consciousness and awareness of creativity and opportunity to develop. So yeah, that's a creative kind of little idea, right? Just to have questions written down that come directly from children from different ages. And maybe siblings, and they may have different ones. And, it'd be interesting for each family to have their own family game.
Very good. Yeah, Aaron also asks, what advice do you have for people who are way out of practice at being creative? How do you get started when you haven't prioritized creativity for a very long time?
I know for myself, when I actually thought about this book, it was something that I started to actually just engage in different experiences. And I think I talked to it of how this came about, but it was really about sort of engaging, first of all, in nature, engaging in terms of allowing thinking time. So I would actually take a part of my day, and I had a space in my home where I actually put a little desk and a chair and a little lamp, and I would go there, and I made an intentional space so that every day I would spend about half an hour to just go to that space, and that became my creative space. So if you physically create a space for it, you start to create a habit that allows you, and sometimes it was like a morning walk before the day starts or an evening walk, and allow yourself to go like to a nice quiet space. And then that space where you sit, you just start to think. And so each of those little things, it's like connecting a dot, like each little place you go there, you start to think and you develop some ideas, and then you extend those ideas. And then before you know it, for myself, when I was writing, it was like I started with a paragraph, and then I wrote, like 4 or 5 pages, and then it became like a chapter, but I would keep going back to my space. So having an intentional space that I created in the home, as well as opportunities to go out on these walks, allowed me to sort of then in my mind percolate ideas, and I allowed them to then become a voice in my mind of how I wanted to portray it in terms of writing. I even write in the back a couple poems that I wrote during my experiences of sort of doing some of my creative explorations. And I found in poetry, I would try to, express myself just as a way to share my thinking of what I was doing. But I think creating a learning space or a creative space was a very important part of it. And then even in that space, you might start to introduce new materials, like you might have a little watercolors palette if you feel like, oh, I just like to try mixing color. Because to me, like, I actually started experimenting with color and creating different tones and colors. And then before I knew it, I was looking for clothing in that color. And I started to think, wow, that's such a beautiful color. And so I started to connect color. It was interesting, like just to, again, even if I saw a flower on a nature walk and I saw that petal color, I'd be like, that's such a unique and beautiful color. Like, it just started to become sort of my palette change. It expanded, and it started to bring in new energies, to be honest. But the poem I wrote, I can read it quickly too. It's today and every day, I promise to continue to take the time to understand the beauty of unique souls, gifts that continue to shape our world and offer so much to us. Each soul has a unique purpose. Each one is special. Each one is empowered. Today and every single day, I stand, I am human, I am woman, I am curious, I am creative, I am learning, I am happy, I am me.
It's beautiful.
Just little things, but in my journey through exploring some of these things, I just started to define myself and started to write things. There's another one I wrote, I am grateful. Today and every day, I'm grateful for the sunrise and the sunset. And this was on my walks as I was walking. For the forest full of trees, the animals, the birds, the lakes, the rivers, and seas. I'm grateful for all the inspirations. I'm grateful for the love that binds us and the wind that sometimes knocks us off our feet, the warmth of the sun, the mystery of the moon, and the coolness of a breeze. As I have grown, I have gained knowledge, continued learning, and opened my wings. And like a caterpillar turning into a butterfly, I thrive and transform. In uncertain times, I feel the need to accelerate my inner search, to be heard, to gather thought, to communicate feelings, to express myself better each day. I am grateful for all those who help me understand.
That's so lovely, the power of poetry, and it's very accessible because it can be in your own free form prose. You can be abstract, or you can be more concrete, picking up on details of your life or some sort of emotion. That was really, really lovely, and thank you for sharing.
Oh, most welcome. So I would encourage you all to just like start with just even if it doesn't come in writing initially, but it might come in thought and at like sometimes the lyrics of a song would inspire me, or I would just listen more carefully to it, or I would start to think more. And then before you knew it, like you could express it in your way, your unique way. And so then you started to create that opportunity for yourself.
That's fantastic advice. We have Anthony who said, I would certainly agree that creativity and personal agency intersect. Gita and Aaron, I want to thank you for your ideas and great answers and information.
Thank you very much. I'm so happy to be here and to be a part of this. Thank you for organizing it, Natalie. I know OISE has been a big journey for me when I did my doctorate work for 5 years studying and, completing research, but thereafter continuing to be a researcher and exploring different projects, connecting with a lot of staff and students at OISE. So I thank you very much for this opportunity to come back as alumni and speak.
No, well, thank you so much. We've learned a lot. Your recent Leaders and Legends Excellence Award is clearly well deserved. I wanted to make sure to mention that. Your research, you've been able to communicate it in such an accessible way for us. So we really appreciate that. And I'd like to let everybody know that we will be sharing any links that you've seen in tonight's presentation as well as the recording, so you can come back and revisit some of these ideas and takeaways at home. One more thing, Geraldine says, as creativity is a key skill we want children to develop, we have to give them permission to be risk takers. Very true.
Excellent. And I encourage, even in the classroom, I always tell the students, I don't want to see everyone's artwork looking the same. I said, everyone come up with your own, use your own colors, ideas, make it different. And I encourage that uniqueness and allow that space. And even those open materials always being available, there's children that will, from a young age of kindergarten, they'll start to like just ask for, well, I need paper, I want to create this, I need this colored paper, I want this, I need the string. So like having all that available to them, and then before you know it, they're like creating different things. So again, as adults, like whether it's those doodle little coloring sheets or anything, but just having a space, as I said, that you allow yourself to have little materials. And and I know loose parts is a big part of curriculum as well, and maker spaces in elementary schools from K to grade 5 or even for middle school. Those little mental breaks are actually helpful and meditative. And I know just a personal example of a neighbor who went through some difficulty in life. And she said the one thing that saved her was actually creating her own purses. And she said that she started to design and create her own purse. And then she started to, create a few more of them. And before she knew it, she realized that it was a way of her healing. And another person that I spoke to that had to deal with an illness said that she started to just create little, I think it was actually something in terms of like a ceramic piece. And then she created them into mandala art and created little pendants and little earrings. And again, that became her meditative practice for healing. And so you'd be surprised at how you can lean on it in different times in your life.
I love that. And it's just reminding me of any time I've written poetry or tried to engage in something creative, you get into a flow state of mind where sort of time melts away. And, our phones and our emails, it doesn't do that. You feel stressed and typically you're not getting a lot of reward from it. But when you get into that flow mind state, when you're, making a purse, creating an earring, writing a poem, that's something very special. And I'm sure it's good for your mind and your soul.
It's actually proven in research that there's different hormones that get released.
Oh, wow.
When you're into that creative space. So you actually start to do good for your body in terms of physical wellness when you get into that space, as you mentioned. Yeah, so there's a lot of studies around the benefits. Yeah, so.
Very cool. I agree, Lisa, delightful talk. It definitely was. And we have someone who said they loved your poems as well.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. And I hope everyone walks away writing a poem before the end of the year, this 2022. Make it your own and make it unique, make it special, because you each have that ability. It's just allowing it.
That's the key, just allowing yourself to do it. It doesn't have to be good. It doesn't, no one has to see it. It's
Mhm.
for you.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Karia. Again, we really appreciate it. I don't see any other questions, so perhaps it's a good time to wrap up.
All right. Thanks again, everyone, and have a good evening and take care.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye.
Take care. Good evening.
Thank you.